legislative priorities to our local, state, senator, and delegate. In your responses to the questionnaire that we put out, all 6 of you supported advocating for the clarification of domicile so that the events don't occur in Williamsburg or any other college town again. However, the majority of you failed to take a stance on whether or not that clarification of domicile should allow college students to vote in their town or not, instead having college students having to vote where their parents live. Several failed efforts in the Virginia General Assembly by both of our local state, senator, and delegate would have standardized the law so that students would not have been able to vote in the locality where they attend college. So the question is, if elected, will each of you not only pledge to include clarification of domicile in the council's legislative priorities, but more importantly, do so in a responsible way that makes clear that Virginia's definition should follow in the footsteps of 37 other states and the District of Columbia by giving students the right to vote, the statutory right to vote in their college town. We'll begin with the 5th from us, so Mr. Freiling, and everyone has 2 minutes to respond to this question.
You know, there's no more fundamental or basic right or responsibility in this country than that of voting. The most underrepresented demographic at the polls are 18 to 24-year-olds. When there's a situation that exists that further discourages this group from participating in the democratic process, that's not a problem. That's a shame. We can't allow that to happen. I've talked to plenty of people in this community who have expressed concern about students voting in Williamsburg because they feel as though they're only here for 4 years. What do they know? What do they care? The point is they're here. We don't ask the same question of the military who are transient. We don't ask the same question of our hotel workers, in many cases who are transient. So we shouldn't be singling out any particular specific population with certain criteria. For as long as I've been on council, we have advocated that the General Assembly define the term domicile. It's ridiculous that our governing body can't make a definition because it's too difficult, yet they leave it to 132 people across the state to come up with their own definition. And you wonder why people get frustrated. Let me just start. I'm just pausing. You still
have a minute.
I'm fully supportive of whatever we can do to get young people involved in the voting process to do so. We need to have some guidelines that ensure that there's integrity to the voter registrar's records. I have no difficulty with students voting in this community. That's why we're here. We're talking to you. And I think it's just important that we all understand that if we're all going to be voting together, we need to be communicating, we need to be exchanging ideas, and we need to be working together for a more healthy and productive community, and I think we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
I agree that the state law should be uniform and enforced the same way all across the state, whether it's Blacksburg, Bradford, Richmond, or Williamsburg. In 1956, to vote for Eisenhower, I had to drive to Philadelphia to cast my vote. I got a ticket coming back that night in West Point. That made it even much more of painful for having done that. But I thought it was worthwhile to vote, to be able to vote the way I felt it ought to go in that particular election. I lived in Williamsburg. I worked at the King's Arms Tavern. I lived in an apartment in Ludwell. I considered Williamsburg my home, but the law was I had to drive 300 miles to Philadelphia. I think that was wrong then. I still think it's wrong. And I would do whatever I can in order to change that. And I think we can get it done.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Wheel?
Yes, it is a complicated problem, I think. The devil's in the details. I know the registrar has a list and a wide latitude to try to determine whether someone lives in the community and this is their home. I'm sure they set it up there with good intention that way, but it's put the registrars in an impossible position, and actually I think they've basically just given up in trying to determine it. And if someone says they wish to register here, they're allowed to register. That's where we've come to now. I understand one of the problems, for instance, is a homeless person. They have the right to vote, but they can't prove where they live. So this is the nuance of the problem. I've also spoken to people who mentioned to me there's no cross-checking. So there's a possibility of voter fraud, that someone could vote in one area and then go to Washington and vote again. So we have to standardize this in some good fashion. It seems to make sense. When I moved here and we had an apartment at Spring Road Apartments, I think they used your driver's license or a tax return or just something to say, this is where I tell people I live. It doesn't matter really where, whether it's on a dorm, in a dorm, or off campus or on campus, but just that you can say, this is what I call home, and that seems to make logical sense. But I certainly would like to see it standardized so no one is disenfranchised.
Thank you. Mr. Allman?
I mean, what we're talking about here is the sanctity of the electoral process. And unless the electoral process is fair and equitable, every one of us should have a problem with it. And right now in Virginia, the electoral process is not equitable and it is not fair, and the General Assembly has to do something to make it equitable and fair. And that means defining domicile in a way that college students can vote where they go to school.
Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Hallman. It's not fair because it's different all over Virginia, as you pointed out in your question. I firmly believe that people who are residents of the town should be able to vote in the town.
Thank you.
You mentioned that 9 months ago I couldn't vote. When I was actually registered to vote for probably 2 years here. But in an interesting situation, I went to the registrar's office about 2 years ago, and I talked to Mr. Andrews, and he informed me that I would not be able to vote here because I didn't have a Virginia driver's license. When I informed him that I didn't drive a car, he repeatedly said that I still need a Virginia driver's license. I said I had no plan to drive in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of New York, or in any other locality in the entire world. But he still insisted that I have that driver's license, and he said he would not accept my application. I handed in my application anyway, and he accepted it, even though he said he would deny. A few weeks later, my roommate, who's back there, Alex Kyrios, he's somewhere back there. Hi, Alex. Alex tried to register. He's my roommate. He lives with me. He was not allowed to register. This did not make any sense to me. It is completely illogical. And the fact of the matter is that the decision on who should register to vote should be defined in the Code of Virginia and not by 132 people across the state. And it should be defined so that college students are able to participate in the electoral process in the place that they live. I hear people on television complain all the time about young people not participating in the electoral process. And then as soon as students decided to participate in the electoral process here a few years ago, they were immediately denied their right to register even though they could have registered a few months before. This kind of flip-flopping by registrars should not be allowed to happen in a state such as this Commonwealth. It is wrong, and we should submit our legislative priorities, which in the past they've been ambiguous. In the future, we should submit them so that we can say college students who live here should be allowed to vote here.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll now move into the next portion of our debate. Many of these questions have been crafted based off of the responses that we received from the candidates to the questionnaire that we sent them maybe 2 weeks ago. And this questionnaire will be submitted. If anyone has questions about it, we do have a copy of it. This section of questions is designed to allow a bit of back and forth to occur between the candidates and to allow them kind of to highlight some of their different positions on issues. None of these questions will be directed at all of you, but rather at an individual or set of candidates that have provided similar answers in their questionnaire. So each candidate to whom we direct these questions will have 1 minute to respond. If there's a candidate who disagrees vehemently with something that was said, they can request 1 minute, and then goes back to a 30-second rebuttal by the candidate to whom the question was asked. Does that make sense? Okay. Sure. So moving along to question 4.